Hello, my name is Vi Ha, and I'm the Senior Librarian from the International Languages Department with the Los Angeles Public Library. I'm here to welcome you to today's Big Read program with our special guest, cookbook author and chef Andrea Nguyễn. We recognize and acknowledge the first people of this land, honor their elders, past and present, and the descendants who are citizens of these nations. For more information on which territory you may reside in, check out native-land.ca. We would like to also recognize the ongoing refugee crisis. For more information, check out rescue.org/topic/refugee-crisis. We'd like to thank the National Endowment for the Arts Big Read, a partnership with Arts Midwest, Department of Cultural Affairs, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Lenore S. and Bernard A. Greenberg Fund, the Library Foundation, and the behind-the-scenes staff for helping to bring this program to you virtually. In addition, we would like to thank the Friends of the Chinatown Library for supporting our Big Read program series. If you would like to see more of our amazing programs, please visit our online calendar at lapl.org/events. Our website also has blog posts and video links that highlight the library's diverse resources and upcoming programs. Participants at today's program will have a chance to win a free copy of The Best We Could Do. Email bigread@lapl.org to receive the link to the survey. In addition to that, you'll also be entered in to win a copy of Vietnamese Food Any Day. And you can also scan the QR code on the screen to access the survey. If during this program you're finding that you're having a difficult time, please contact the Los Angeles County Emotional Support Warm Line here at 800-854-7771, available 10:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily. And now, on to today's program. Andrea Nguyễn is a Vietnamese-born American teacher, food writer, cookbook author, and chef living in California. An expert on Asian cuisine and cooking methods, Nguyen has written numerous cookbooks on the food of her native Vietnam, as well as an account of her family's escape during the fall of Saigon. She writes an active blog, as well as articles for newspapers and food magazines, and teaches cooking classes throughout the country. Now, let's welcome to our virtual library stage, Andrea Nguyen.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for inviting me to join you in celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Week. A month, actually, not just a week, we got a whole month.
We're going to bring it up and make it an entire year. We're starting today.
Love it.
So thank you so much for coming on our show today. How are you doing? Everything's great?
Everything is so wonderful. I am delighted that Asian American Pacific Islander foodways, culture, what we're into are getting the spotlight these days nationally. This is a month that has been around for a long time. And so the fact that the Los Angeles Public Libraries is pushing so strongly to celebrate folks all over the country it thrills me to no end. I can't tell you, Lee. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, it's very, very different. My mother would tell you it's very, very different from when she first came over in '75. It's a totally different landscape, and we're very excited for representation. I guess since we're talking about Vietnam, can you tell us your story of how you came over to this country and how your family came over?
Of course, my family was lucky to have fled Vietnam in 1975, 1 week before the fall of Saigon. And we were on a plane. When I tell this story, I kind of joke that we were was leaving business class, you guys, because so many people that we knew who got stuck behind, leaving, by boat, staying in refugee camps in Asia, for example. Our family was able to, frankly, fake documentation that allowed us to get into the airport in Saigon, Tan Son Nhut Airport, and get out on a plane. And we landed in Hawaii, first Guam. We stayed there for a week. And I remember I was 6 years old at the time, and I even though I was only 6, I knew that things were a real mess. And my family had planned a sea escape for a very long time. And when that got all shut down because the South Vietnamese government wasn't allowing any unofficial boats to leave the harbor, we had to abandon that plan. So my mother had stuck little pieces of gold into life vests that she sewed for the boat escape. And so she was like tearing those apart in the middle of the night. And, we didn't know how we were going to leave. And when we were able to, and when we landed in Guam, even when I was 6 years old, I was like, my God, this is a feeling of freedom, a feeling of safety. I think of the word mat in Vietnamese, which just means like this refreshing feeling. And that's how I felt, being able to run free, even though I only had like 2 changes of clothing with me, because that's all we got to pack was 1 change along with what we were wearing. I felt so lucky. And we eventually, very soon later, came to Southern California, and we're in Camp Pendleton. And eventually we settled in the town of San Clemente.
I think the Guam to Camp Pendleton is how my mother came over. So I'm like, yes, that's a very familiar story. What was were there any heirlooms or special items that your family was able to bring over?
Yes, we brought very little. So photographs, documentation, birth certificates and stuff like that. But one of the things that my mother brought was a little orange notebook. This is it right here. And this is a notebook that my mother wrote her handwritten recipes in. And I can show you, the front says like Mom's Book of Domesticity in Vietnamese. And if you travel, I didn't, think that this was like, I thought it was really special, but when I went back to Vietnam for the first time and I went to some of the museums there, I saw on display other similar kinds of notebooks that people had like written in. So it was like a really common thing back in the 70s to have this particular orange notebook with this like, white guy with like Olympic rings, like holding the torch and all that. So she wrote down her recipes. Like the first recipe is for a pomelo salad. And subsequently, she had my sisters, who are all older than me, also copy down recipes in their nice penmanship, and sometimes do drawings too. And she brought this over to America because she thought, my goodness, all these Vietnamese people will be fleeing Vietnam and they're going to want something to eat. And I'm going to open up a restaurant. Well, that didn't happen because we were living in San Clemente and few Vietnamese people settled there because, eventually, as some of you may know, the granddaddy of Little Saigons developed about 40 minutes north of San Clemente in Orange counties, Garden Grove, off of Brookhurst and on Bolsa Avenue. So there we were in San Clemente. And so she relied on the little orange notebook to recreate a lot of the flavors that she remembered. But she also had 5 kids. And I was chubby enough to really and loved food. And she thought, all right, you can be my little kitchen helper, kid. And so that's how my cooking adventure started.
Wow, fantastic. So what's the organization of the recipes? Or because I learned how to cook and it's all like by feel. So how yeah.
Right. So the thing with my mom, she's a strange lady. She measures by rice bowl. She measures by certain Chinese soup spoons, right? And certain like metal serving spoons that she got at the 5 and dime store or the 99-cent store. But she also weighed things and she wrote her recipes down. It was like really, really unusual because she had this for her. Well, you think about it. If you were cooking in Vietnam in the 60s and 70s, you wouldn't have like standardized measuring cups the way that we have them here in the United States in modernity. And you had a scale, perhaps, but oftentimes people didn't have a scale. My mom did. She loved it. She also had like a food processor. She was very fortunate in that regard, as well as a hand crank meat grinder for making Vietnamese sausages, yaw and jia. But so she had this like partly traditional and partly modern way of taking a look at cooking. So she always wrote her recipes down, the things that she liked. She also did this cool thing with other Vietnamese refugees, is that they would get on the phone during the week or after 11 o'clock at night, and they would be swapping recipes and saying, oh, you know what ingredient I found where? Do you know who opened what grocery store now? And they would go and they would support those businesses, and they would meet up with friends, and they would swap recipes and techniques. So that's how, like, we knew that if we went to a regular American mainstream supermarket, that we could use Coda Farms Mochiko rice flour to make dumplings, you know?
Wow.
And we could also, like, instead of for bánh cuốn, rice paper, steamed rice paper rolls, people were like using swan's down cake flour, which is a wheat flour. And my mom's like, oh yeah, you know, that technique, we were all getting ready for it because this one woman in 74 sent information back to Vietnam, and it spread through the ladies. And we all knew that, you know, we needed to be looking for this particular flour when we got to America, and use something called a nonstick skillet. And so they would kind of like, before viral was viral, viral meant getting on the phone. and phone rates were cheaper back then on the weekends and after 11 p.m. and I think before 8 a.m. So it was a very interesting way to share information and my mom codified things in here until the entire book was filled. But what happens is when you go along in the book, after midway, there suddenly appears American recipes, such as the 7-layer cookie, which my mom loved because there was, like, some of her favorite things: coconut, chocolate chips, nuts, and peanut butter. So this, when I wrote my first cookbook, I asked my mom about the orange one. Yeah, Into the Vietnamese Kitchen, and this is photographed in that book. When I was done with the book, my mom said to me, you know what? You can have the little orange notebook. It is our family heirloom, and I am giving it to you. I am gifting it to you because I no longer need it. I have a recipe card box now. So that's what she uses, because she filled up the little orange notebook.
It has another 200 recipes in the card box.
Exactly. And now she uses my cookbooks, because she says to me, oh, I'm so happy you wrote the recipes down with detail, because I forget so many things, and you really made like little tweaks and stuff, and it's really great to have a good written recipe.
Yeah, I completely forgot about using the rice bowl as a measuring utensil. I forgot. It's just awesome that, yeah, I know my mom, yeah, we would just cook that way.
But the thing that's so fascinating is that my mom's particular rice bowl measured 1 cup. Standard. Wow. 1 cup. It was very, you know what? They're probably 8-ounce bowls. And so if you were to fill it and then level off the top, I was like, Mom, this is 1 cup. And she's like, oh, I bought her measuring cups and measuring spoons, and she rarely uses them. I think if she uses them when she uses my recipes. But otherwise, she's like doing her own, freewheeling it her way in her home.
So who are the formative chefs besides your mother that shaped your technique and your palate?
Well, when we initially came to the United States, some people, like my mom, had these notebooks. But then also there were certain cookbooks in the Vietnamese American community that were circulated, I don't know, probably, well, frankly, illegally. All right. And so one of them was this book written by Mrs. Van Dye, Limeade. And mine, the first copy that my family had was photocopied, and it's kept in a 3-ring binder. And so eventually a stateside publishing company started producing like bound copies of it. And this is a book that goes back to the 1940s. And it's the equivalent of like The Joy of Cooking in Vietnam and in Vietnamese cookbooks. It was the first really like big comprehensive cookbook that taught you techniques and foundational recipes, mostly from Northern Vietnam, but written in a way that you got it. And they're very, very short recipes. For example, here is like, you know, like the pho recipe is 1 paragraph, all right? And it's like, you're supposed to know what to do, of course, but it is literally like, you know, a few sentences, and you are supposed to have a sense of, okay, so here is the pho recipe, and I will, here you go. This is it here. Yeah. It's like really short, you guys. And I'm sorry that you know, there we go.
It's reversed, yeah.
Yeah, it's reversed, you guys. So so it's like 1 paragraph long. And but back then what happened, people didn't travel very much. So if you were Vietnamese, you had a sense of ingredients, just like if you were in the United States, you had a sense of certain ingredients, certain dishes that were in your repertoire. And so Mrs. Van Dye was a poet, poetess, and learned and very cultured. And about 2/3 of the book is Vietnamese, and Vietnamese with like Chinese recipes, of course, and some South Asian recipes like curries. And then the other third of the book is filled with French recipes. Because if you were like, you know, if you were an accomplished Vietnamese cook, a lady, you know, whether you had servants or not, you should know Vietnamese, some Chinese, and some French dishes. And I love that book so much that I have the spiral bound, you know, the 3-ring binder version, the copy that you have. I have a copy that I bought in Saigon at a bookstore, and I also have like this vintage copy that, and just like look at the paper, V. I mean, like it's old.
The cover, it's of the time period. You can tell. It's the
Yeah,
original cover.
And
in the Viet font.
Yes, this is the Viet font. And my mother sews. She became a dressmaker when she came to the United States. So she sewed a little plastic cover for the book so that, you know, so she
Of course.
of course. But Mrs. Van Dyke's voice in writing, and I can read her recipes and I can make the dish. Another person who was very transformative was Mrs. Quoc Viet. She now lives in Australia, but she taught cooking classes in the 1970s in Saigon. And so I was really interested in reading these old books and getting a sense of what Vietnamese food is. And after I I went to Vietnam for the first time in 2003 to research, and I would always buy up books in Vietnam. But before that, I have to tell you, I went to the Central Library because I realized that the Los Angeles Central Library has one of the best collections of Vietnamese cooks written in Vietnamese and in English. And I began collecting them, but I wanted to see what else was available historically. And so it was just this amazing thing that you can see the cuisine over the decades. And I'm talking that I was looking at the books in like the 90s, and there's information at the library that goes back, you know, to the 70s at least. But I spent a lot of time in the stacks looking at those books.
Cool. Thank you for the shout out. That was a great endorsement. Yes, we are very, very proud of our cookbook, our cookbook collection here. And your cookbooks are in our collection. So I think this is probably a good time to have you showcase one of the recipes from your cookbook. Right?
Yeah, so I want to show you guys something that's very, very straightforward. And I have to tell you that when I'm teaching Vietnamese cooking classes, if I can if I can show people how to master 3 things, you will become such a good Vietnamese cook. One of the things is a good, perfect pot of rice, the way you like it. The second thing is Vietnamese caramel sauce, which is a whole different kind of thing that's used for homey food called caw, which are simmered in like a savory, sweet caramel sauce with fish sauce oftentimes. And the last thing is Nook Gem, which is the ubiquitous all-purpose dipping sauce. And there are many ways that Vietnamese cooks prepare it. And I have my particular method, and I just want to quickly walk you through it so that you can make it too. And I've shared the recipe with the Los Angeles Public Library. So you don't have to jot notes down. So here's my cutting board. There are different ways of making this sauce, but most of the time, like classically, it is based on lime juice. So chấm, and we have a lot of limes in Vietnam. And so people use it. Some folks will use a base of vinegar, but I like limes because it's a more, for this version, it has a little bit more of a bite. And what I do is I always roll my limes like that before I cut them to just kind of crush them a little bit. And I need 3 to 4 tablespoons of lime juice. And so I like my limes to have some texture to them, the lime juice. So I use a reamer and a strainer like this. And it does a pretty good job at getting the juices out. Now, when you're buying limes, try to get a lime that is very smooth and kind of shiny, almost kind of bald looking, because that means that it's a juicy one. For some reason, right now, those are not available. So these are a little bit dry, and I gotta lean in a little bit more. But look for those kind of juicy limes. Or you may grow them too. Bear lime, Persian limes, they're very, very similar. And in Southern California, it's like citrus heaven. So if you don't have a lime tree and you have space, please get one. All right. So I have my lime juice here. Now, the thing with making Nook Gem is that a lot of people go, oh, you know what, just stir everything together and voila, it's done. The problem is that limes vary so much in terms of their tartness. Sometimes they're a little bit bitter. So I have about, a 1/4 cup here, but I also love the solids too. So I kind of dump that in. If you are using like a press, a squeezy, like what you would see a bartender use, by all means use a little bit less because you don't have the solids to kind of buffer the flavor. So I make a limeade first, okay? Because what I'm going to do is control the tartness and dial it in. I've got about, 2.5 tablespoons of sugar here. I'm going to back off just a little bit. And then I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of lime juice and some warm water. You know what? A lot of us have like these pots nowadays, and they are great for making tea, but they are also great for doing something like this. This is warm water. It's not hot. So I am making this in a measuring cup because then I don't have to measure out every single thing separately. I can just gauge the amount that I needed, and I wanted 1/2 cup of warm water. And I'm using the warmish water because I want the sugar to dilute relatively quickly. Now, if you use organic cane sugar, you're going to use a little bit less than what I call for, because cane sugar, the granules are a little bit bigger and it weighs a little bit more than white sugar. And so it's not the same in terms of volume and measurement. If you're not into refined sugar, by all means you can use maple syrup or agave, although agave is considered a refined sugar. And if you use agave, it's like a straight shot, which swap with sugar. If you use maple syrup, you want to go 3 to 4 tablespoons. All right, I'm going to taste this. I think it's tasting all right. I want a little bit more tartness. Now, Sometimes limes have a bitter edge to them, you guys. And when that happens, you want to kind of round things out by adding a little unseasoned rice vinegar, just like 1 to 2 teaspoons. And the kind of rice vinegar that I use is Japanese unseasoned rice vinegar. It's got a really like bright flavor. It doesn't have anything else in there but vinegar. Why buy something that's pre-seasoned for you if you're going to be using it in cooking? Because you want to control your own flavors. And the cool thing about what I'm making here is that all of these ingredients are readily available at a mainstream supermarket. So now that I've got my my tangy, limeade base, I am going to add, I want a little, I feel sour today, V, so I'm just going to add a little bit more lime juice. Now I'm going to add fish sauce. So there are a lot of different kinds of fish sauce available, different brands. And when my family came to the United States, there was no fish sauce at the American supermarket. And so we had to wait until we could get a car and go to Los Angeles, Chinatown, to buy fish sauce and rice noodles and rice paper. But nowadays you can go into a regular supermarket and you have options, which I think is like so incredibly cool. Just think about how hard we had it back in 1975. All right, so I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of fish sauce. And the thing why I don't add it all at once is because fish sauce has different levels of intensity. And also you may like to have a flavor that's a little bit lighter than others. And on some days or some dishes, you want it to be saltier than others. So, adjust things as you go. Formulate your own version each time. So I'm going to give this a taste. Tastes pretty good to me. So with just the 3 tablespoons. It also depends on how old your fish sauce is. So when you're working with fish sauce, know that it will kind of age and intensify. And so and different brands have different sodium levels. And so, you are always having to learn about your ingredients and also what you may prefer at certain times of the week or even the day when you're cooking. All right, back to the board. Now, yes.
Andrea, do you want to move your camera up a little bit? We can't see it.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Pivot.
There we go.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. I know. I can't. I've only got my little camera going here. So this is the fun part, you guys. You get to now add optionals. So maybe they're chilies. These are homegrown chilies that I harvested, to tell you the truth, back in 2019 from my garden.
You froze them?
Yeah, girlfriend. They do it at the Vietnamese market. They sell frozen chili. So why can't you grow chilies at home and freeze them too? And I am going to add a couple of them to the sauce. And I'm going to show you something that I do here. I don't use gloves because I chop chilies a lot. And let's say that I want to chop them, not just cut rings. What I'm doing here, and I hope you can see this, is I'm holding onto the chili by the stem, because the chili stem becomes my little handy helper. See how it's like helping me clean things up. It helps me push the chopped chilies onto my knife blade. And this is a Chinese vegetable cleaver, y'all. And it's a really handy tool. It looks scary, but don't be scared by it.
Do you use a 7-inch and a 12-inch, or do you do most of your cooking with a cleaver like that?
Right now, I'm working on a vegetable-centric Vietnamese cookbook. And so there's a lot of chopping. And this cleaver, which is made in Hong Kong, is really great for dicing, slicing, mincing vegetables, as well as any kind of like boneless soft meats. I mean, you can butcher chicken with it, but you know, you have to be a little careful, but it's really like pretty amazing. It's stainless steel. I've got a carbon steel version too, but this is my favorite knife right now. I can't tell you. So easy to return its blade to a sharp edge, and it keeps it for quite a while. I even have one at my mom's house. She says it's a little scary. I've been trying to get her to use it, but she just keeps it in a special place for when I come home. But this little chili trick here is something that I do all the time because I don't want to wear gloves. I don't want to waste gloves. But in the event that I
touch your eye,
yes, take my contact lenses out at night, I am very, very careful. So if you like garlic, you can add a little bit of garlic as well. And if you want some texture and perhaps a little bit of sweetness, add a little carrot. I just like coarsely grated this on like a box grater. And once that you add it to the Nook Gem, it provides a really lovely texture. And if the carrot's really nice and sweet, it will also lend some slight sweetness. So there is your Nook Gem, and you can just like put that together when you're making it. It will last, you know, for about, you know, a day. But if you're going to refrigerate it, sometimes it can turn a little bit bitter. So you want to make sure that, you know, you may have to tweak it a little bit, maybe add a little vinegar to round it out if it turns a little bit bitter for you. So what do you do with Nook Gem, right? I mean, like what's your favorite thing to do with Nook Gem?
Well, of course we eat it with goikun, which is the spring rolls. We also eat it with. We're atypical. We eat goikun. We eat the spring rolls with the Nook Gem. We don't even bother with the peanut sauce. Which it wasn't until I started going to restaurants that I saw people eating it with the peanut sauce. Is that traditional or?
You know, there are so many. I think it's friendly. And it makes it special. And I think people think of the peanut hoisin sauce as something that goes well with the classic gaikung with, you know, pork and shrimp. And if you're selling it, right, like if you want something that's kind of thick, like if you were, because you know when we go buy the rolls on the plastic trays, there's always a little goodie of dipping sauce, and if it's Nook Gem, it's very loose. And what if that spilled? Oh my God!
Oh, your car would smell for months. It would be over.
You wouldn't like go back and buy from that person. So you're a little bit safer to use a thick sauce, but it tastes good too. However, I think that Nook Gem is much more practical. It's much more flexible because that sauce, the peanut hoisin sauce, doesn't go with everything. You know?
No, I don't know how to make it. I mean, it's like it's that kind of like it's not very common.
Yeah. And nowadays it seems like everybody, when I make goikun, and I set out, you know, Nook Gem, and people are like, wait a second, where's the peanut hoisin sauce? And I'm like, it doesn't go with everything because it's very heavy, you know, and it kind of gloms on to things. So sometimes, like if in Vietnamese Food Any Day, there's a recipe for you grill whole trout and use that for rice paper rolls. And you know what? You don't want to the peanut hoisin sauce would just like bring that thing down, man. You know, but if you've got Nook Gem, it's like, whoo, everything comes together, and there's synergy with the fish and the herbs, you know, and the noodles. Yeah, it's just this is really, you know, you can put on rice, you can dress salads with it. It's very, very versatile.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's salad, you know, what is it? Goiga, anything, everything. This is the classic foundational sauce. But yeah. So what are the other sauces that are common in Vietnamese cooking? So we talked about the peanut and hoisin sauce. Oh, we lost Andrea. I can't hear you. I want to read some comments in the chat. when that's so pretty much there are these wonderful cookbooks. Oh, Andrea, you're muted. If you
Oh,
can unmute you.
that's so weird.
I have no idea.
It suddenly muted me. Well, I'm back.
That's great because we were having a wonderful conversation about Vietnamese sauces right now, and I'm ready to be. So
Internet, you weren't on our side, but we recovered because we are Viet women. Okay.
okay. So other sauces that are common in Vietnamese dishes. There's also the. Go ahead.
So you can make, like there's a Nook Gem variation that you can add ginger to it, Nook Gem gừng, right? And there's also like mắm tôm pha, which is made with fermented shrimp sauce. I know it sounds weird, but it's really, really good. And people also love the tamarind dipping sauce, which is lovely with grilled dishes. There's also the one that is a. I mean, there are so many sauces and there are also sauces like if folks are into that Brodard rolls down in the Orange County area, they have like a sauce that I've never really seen before. It's kind of orangey yellow and thick and slightly sweet. And that's something that I'm completely unfamiliar with. And I don't know what goes into that one. I've also heard someone share with me the other day that their mom whisked some hoisin sauce together with strawberry jam.
Okay, that's what happens when you come to America and you can't find ingredients. But yeah, that's a really good place to ask the question of how has Vietnamese cooking since coming to America? I mean, since there's so many different ingredients here now, and how has Vietnamese cooking in Vietnam has changed since?
Most definitely. I think that one of the great examples of Vietnamese food changing in America is a story of Viet Cajun. So I'm talking about the seafood boils. And a number of years ago, for the Southern Foodways Alliance, which is based out of University of Mississippi at Oxford, asked me to do a project about Viet seafood boils. And so I interviewed folks, Andrea Nguyễn of the Boiling Crab. And she talked about how her husband's family were among the families of shrimpers that came from, and fisher people that came from Vietnam to the American South. So we're talking in New Orleans, in Alabama, in Texas, and they arrived there and worked in the seafood industry as fisher people and noticed that, there were all of these crawfish boils and seafood boils going on in the South. And they're like, oh, we can do this too. And when you think about it, it makes so much sense. If you've traveled,
love seafood.
We love seafood. We love picking on little things, right? And we love to nibble and make little, sauces and to have nosh sessions called nyo. And so it just really worked. And she said, after Katrina, a lot of folks left New Orleans and they went westward to Texas. And so they brought this idea with them for, and tradition, Vietnamese American tradition, or even American Vietnamese, Mi Viet is what people would say, of these foodways. And they started opening little restaurants, seafood boils. But the thing that they all, Vietnamese people were so great because we're always like, I can do that a little bit different. I can do it a little bit better. So people were making muối tiêu chanh. So, right? So because it's if with that dipping sauce. Okay, so that's
the easiest of the dipping sauce.
That's right. That's no brainer, folks. So, I go 1-to-2 ratio of kosher salt to white pepper. You can use black pepper if you want. And then squeeze on a bunch of limes. And so, you dip your Viet Cajun boil in that sauce. I knew this woman who was from in Louisiana, outside of New Orleans. And she came over and she was very young. She could peel shrimp like a machine, man, not even looking at the shrimp. But she used mujiujian, and she also loved ketchup with black pepper and a lot of lime juice. And that is like her version of something called a comeback sauce. And sometimes she mixed mayonnaise in there too. So there was all of this mixing, right, of Viet Cajun. So Viet Cajun like becomes a thing in America. And the thing that's within the Vietnamese community, a thing that like for young people as well as families to go and to have a different experience other than pho when you go out to eat. And there's also liquor flowing, you know, and it's like exciting. But the most interesting thing also is that I know Vietnamese Americans who went back to Vietnam, to Saigon, and opened up Viet Cajun restaurants there.
Of course, that's what you do. I mean, people love to go out to eat in Saigon, and I mean, sorry, Ho Chi Minh, and yeah, it's a thing.
It's a thing. So there's this fluid exchange of you know, ideas going on now, thanks to travel, and also thanks to the internet. You know, when I am researching things, if I can't get to Vietnam, like the pandemic has made it, you know, I'm like looking at stuff, you know, reading different recipes, seeing what's going on. And there are Vietnamese people all over the world cooking and sharing information. It's really, it's a fabulous time to cook and to eat and learn.
Yeah, I mean, I did, yeah, and it's just sort of like things where like food trends here in the States go back to Vietnam, and then all these weird, like right now there's a big insurgence of like Vietnamese coffee drinks and fancy coffee shops serving Vietnamese coffee, which is going to be interesting to see how that turns out, especially within the coffee scene. I'm going to read a question inside the chat here. What are your favorite Vietnamese restaurants in Los Angeles, Orange County, and also New York City and New Jersey? We're combining two questions together. Disparate coast here.
Oh man. All right. So in the OC, God, there's a lot. So my family enjoys going to Faholic. And I recently took my mom to Quang Hee, the one on Bolsa, so like the original one. Because my mom's like kind of old school, and I suggested like a new school place that seemed kind of very hip to her, and we were even in the car, and she says to me, "I don't know," and I'm like, "All right, you know, let's see what else is available." And I suggested Quang Hee. She said, "Yes, that sounds good." And we went there, and it's a place where there were a lot of families. There were also
It's
like,
Central Vietnamese
it's
food.
Central Vietnamese, yes. So we were looking to eat bún bò Huế. We were, but I love Quang Hee because they have these steamed rice sheets, bánh ướt and bánh bèo, that are just tremendous. And the bánh ướt, they're steamed in house, and if you go midday, they're really super fresh. There's like a person who comes in the morning to make them, and they're just absolutely delightful. There's a bánh cuốn place in the OC called bánh cuốn Liu Lian, which is very lovely. That's tiny, but you can like go in there, and there's a window towards the cashier area that you can watch the ladies make them. I mean, like close up. You're only like a few feet away from it. It's like totally cool, you guys. It's like old school cooking. And there are so many other places I don't even know. So if you got a favorite spot, please share it in the chat so that other folks know as well. In New York, I haven't been back to New York for a while, but one of the restaurants that I do enjoy, well, includes Lucy's, which is a young man who is making pho in a Texas style, which means he smokes beef brisket and slices it up and adds it to his broth, and it's really, really good. D&D is run by a really great group of Vietnamese Americans. Dennis Ngo and his business partners have a really lovely, lovely business that's well run, very professional. And then there's also like in Chinatown, New York, there is a really cool, there's like this banh mi place that's sort of in a jewelry store. You all know it if you've like been to New York Chinatown. And I mean, there's just good Vietnamese food everywhere. And, you know, I mean, it changes like every restaurant. You know, I always feel like when I make a restaurant recommendation, then people are like, I went there and it wasn't so good. I'm like, but you know, it's not like that every day unless you go to Denny's or McDonald's.
Okay, thank you for that. And please put some recommendations in the chat. We're very looking forward to going on a food trail. So I think there are a couple of things we should talk about. You have choice. We can talk about, because we haven't talked about the different cooking regions in Vietnam, or we can talk about all the varieties of pho that's coming to America, since it's not just one traditional way of doing it anymore. So you have your pick of which way you want to go.
I'm going to take both of them, V, because I think I can do it.
Okay.
All right, here we go. If you want to understand Vietnamese regional cooking, you want to think about Vietnamese regional cooking in terms of the 3 noodle soups, okay? And the first noodle soup is pho, and pho originated in the northern part of the country, in and around Hanoi. And pho classically is very light. It's soothing, served in smallish portions with a clear, delicate broth that's infused with spices such as star anise and fennel and smoked cardamom and coriander seed and clove. A lot of those spices, I mentioned to them, are spices that are also found where else? Chinese 5-spice. So there was, you know, China's right there and influences a lot of northern Vietnamese cooking that tends to be a little bit more delicate, that's steamed. And so, you know, you've also got the flat rice noodles that are enjoyed with pho as well. And so think about, you know, those delicate bowls of pho noodle soup up there. Then you get down to the central region, which is narrow. And they have they're tough, gutsy people, despite what people may say about Hue as being the central place for imperial cuisine, the delicateness of things. People in the central region are toughies. They also have a very narrow landmass, so they really can't grow that much. So their food is like, you know, got a lot of soul and a lot of guts to it. And their noodle soup is bún bò Huế. And bún bò Huế doesn't really employ spices. Bún bò Huế has chilies. It's got lemongrass. It's got mắm tôm or mắm ruốc. And it's got these spaghetti-like chewy round rice noodles that carry those flavors really, really well. It also combines these kind of tough cuts of beef, primarily like beef shin called thịt bò bắp, as well as like pork trotters. So like the shank, you know, around close to the
less than fancy cuts of meat.
Yeah, and so it's like really these tough cuts, you know, and you're like, and you're sweating and you're eating it and you're like, whoo, I gotta wipe my brow. So that's the central region. You get down to the southern part, in and around Hanoi and the Mekong Delta, we're talking, it is Hủ Tiếu land. And what is Hủ Tiếu? Hủ Tiếu is a crazy, you know, surf and turf combination noodle soup that originated with the Chiu Chao Teochew people who are from southern China, migrated a lot throughout Southeast Asia, and wherever they went, they brought their rice noodle craft with them. The noodles are flat, just like the ones used for pho, but they are called hủ tiếu, and so they go into the noodle soup. But wait, because the Chiu Chao are such good entrepreneurial people, they will have over time like made their noodle soup really like tweakable, endlessly tweakable. And so you can have it however you want, which means you can have pork, chicken, seafood, you can have crispy fried things, you can have it with the soupy broth in the bowl, you can have it on the side, which means the noodles are in the bowl with all the toppings, and then there's a little cool sauce at the bottom. You mix everything up and you can add a little bit of broth to it. Not only can you have the flat rice noodles, the hủ tiếu noodles, but you can have egg noodles. You can have chewy tapioca noodles. And then there are all kinds of herbs that go in there too, but no spices go in there. And the difference why I'm telling you all that is you've got more of like the conservative, delicate broth in the north of pho. And then you've got the central region's gutsy bún bò Huế. And then you've got the southern regions like kaleidoscopic hủ tiếu that you can have in so many different ways. And it's kind of confusing, but Southerners love to live large. So if you think about Vietnamese food in terms of those 3 regional noodle soups, you got it nailed. But that said, pho is coming into its own by way of travel, and there are many different kinds of pho. So it's not, traditionally, it was not just pho bao, beef pho. There's chicken pho. There is pho with stir-fried beef that goes on top, which is not a new thing. It's an old thing that my mother recalls eating back in the 1940s in northern Vietnam. There's also pho cuốn, which is the rice noodle sheets, but you have the beef rolled inside, and it's cut into small portions, and you eat that as a little snacky. And there's pho cocktails. I found all of this out when I went back to Vietnam and did research on pho for my cookbook, the Pho Cookbook. And also in the United States, you can get a pho beef dip sandwich, you guys, and it's really good. So, pho is more than what we think it is, but Vietnam is definitely more than we think it is too. So I think that I was able to do a pretty good job with regional food and pho.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, and also it's kind of great of showing the kind of tenacity of Vietnamese cooks or the Vietnamese culture where wherever we go, we just adopt to the cooking style and we experiment. The joy of experimenting cooking for, I mean, with my parents, definitely with people of my grandparents, they, whatever they found, they pretty much made it delicious.
Exactly.
So, how did you in the way you did the research and creating recipes for your cookbook? I think like from this cookbook here on pho, you talked about how pho ga came from the 1930s. How did you find that out? Like,
Well, my parents were born in the 30s, and but there have been a few articles, very, very few articles written in Vietnamese. And so I did a lot of research reading those articles. I also have books written in Vietnamese on Vietnamese foodways that I've gathered over the years. And so it was a lot of piecing together of information. For a while, Vietnamese pho history was kind of defined by some expatriate French chefs who were living in Hanoi that gave people like a push. But at the same time, like there were these theories that pho was somehow related to pot au pho. And some Vietnamese people were pushing that notion too. And I was like, no, pho is pho, and it is not the same as pot au pho, even though it sort of sounds the same. And so there was this one article written by a man, and forgive me for not remembering his name, but it's mentioned in the introduction of the Pho Cookbook in the history of pho section. And he wrote a very lengthy piece where he just really laid out the origins of the name as being related to a pigeon, like a twisting, a shorthand version of a noodle soup vendor's call for a Chinese style noodle soup that eventually became pho. It's very strange, but just know that pho is something that came about simply because of different cultures rubbing shoulders in Vietnam. And the different cultures include the Vietnamese, the Chinese, and the French. But it is wholly a Vietnamese dish.
thank you for that answer. There's a question from the audience. How long does it take for you to write a cookbook?
Sometimes it takes 3 years. Sometimes it takes 2 years. Sometimes it takes 4 years. It depends. A book takes 1 year to produce. And what I mean to produce is the editing, the photo shoots, the design, and also the printing and shipping. But then before that, if you back it up, then there's like a year or two of writing. So I develop every single recipe in my home kitchen. You're looking at my home kitchen here. It's not, it looks fancy, but it's a 9 by 13 space. And I work alone to develop recipes, and I work those recipes through multiple times. Sometimes it takes me a whole month to figure something out if it's really hard. And then after I figure out the recipes and I'm happy with them, then I send it out to be tested by a volunteer group of testers. And then, so, it's testing, and then I write a manuscript, and then it gets edited and massaged and polished until it's ready. And that minimum, if when a book is fast, it takes 1 year, but that is going to really, really be fast. And I want my books to last for a long time. So for me, a cookbook's going to take 2 years to write, 1.5, 2 years to write, plus a year of production. So 3 years between books typically.
That is an endeavor. Thank you so much for putting that time and energy to that. And again, it's been kind of like this book. I mean, I cannot tell you how wonderful and beautiful this book is. It sort of just really does. I mean, talking about like dishes that, I've never thought that I'd learn how to make yaw, like Vietnamese sausage, and how to do that. It's just a really interesting and very thorough book of what happens next. Question: what is your next cookbook? Do you have one that you can talk about?
I can talk about it. I don't even have to kill you, V. It's all right. I can share. So the reason why I have the cleaver and many versions of vegetable cleavers is I'm working on a vegetable-centric Vietnamese cookbook, and it'll be out in the spring of 2023. It's called Evergreen Vietnamese, and it's about showcasing the ways that vegetables star in the Vietnamese kitchen. I'm not a vegetarian, but most of the book includes vegetables and just spotlighting really like my Vietnamese roots done sometimes traditionally, sometimes in a modern way. But it's a book for everybody, and I have scaled back and tweaked my my diet primarily because at midlife you just can't eat all the fried food that you really, really think that you want to. and so it's how I enjoy eating now, and I feel like it's such a wonderful expression of Vietnamese cooking, because you know what, a lot of food in Vietnam was like put together, was created from ingredients that were harvested from the earth. And when you think about it, what goes into a bowl of pho is rice noodles. That's rice. And fish sauce, I mean, that comes from the sea, but also all of the garnishes and all the spices and stuff. And think about everyday Vietnamese cooking of all of the vegetables and all the herbs that are used, and circle back again to rice. I mean, it's really based on what the bounty of the planet can provide for us. And it's evergreen.
Thank you. And no Vietnamese meal is complete without vegetables. It's just we can't do it.
Yep, okay. We just can't. We're not like meaty folks, even though people think of meat as being like this thing now. But if you go back and take a look at the kinds of dishes that were prepared, and even I reflect upon the kinds of food that I ate with my parents after my siblings left the house and went to college, it was mostly like vegetable-centric, plant-forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you so much for this program, Andrea. It's been such a pleasure.
I can't tell you how thrilled I am. I don't live in LA, but I go down there a lot still. And I was just thrilled when the Los Angeles Public Library reached out for this program. And I hope that every year you showcase Asian American Pacific Islanders, during the month of May, and include food, because I think it's a great way for us to learn about ourselves and also about one another.
Great idea. Well, I think we should do this. Okay. If you're interested in learning more about Vietnamese cooking and culture, at, at the Central Library, the Los Angeles Public Library, we have a sizable cookbook collection. There is the English language cookbook collection in the Science, Technology, and Patents Department. There's a menu collection and a rare cookbook collection in special collections. And as we mentioned earlier, it's a cookbook collection in languages other than English collected in international languages. Andrea spent time in her formative years researching in our Vietnamese language cookbook collections. Again, thank you so much for joining us today for today's Big Read program. And don't forget to check out our next NEA Big Read program by visiting lapl.org/big-read. Here's the link to our survey for your chance to win a copy of The Best We Can Do and a copy of Vietnamese Food Any Day, and also an opportunity to drive for a gift card for $50 at the library store. Your entry must be in by Wednesday of this coming week. Please join us again later at 4 p.m. for our next Big Read program. We will be having an action-packed variety show with chef and cookbook author Nguyen Tran of Starry Kitchen. This program will be on Zoom. To register, please send an email to bigread@lapl.org. Until next time, we truly appreciate all your support. The success of all of our library programs cannot happen without viewers like you. Thank you.